Welcome to the inaugural tape or show for midwesthockey.info. I'm Jim Den Hollander. This is my partner, Trent Barney. He's sort of, Trent has joined us for sort of the pro part of midwesthockey.info. He's a bit of an expert on, in particular, the NHL. He follows it very closely. Because this is the first show, I kind of wanted just to introduce midwesthockey.info and what the website is going to be all about. Trent, we're going to have three different sections: pro, which I'm sure is your favorite, junior, which you know a little bit about as well, and college, which is kind of a new area for me. Yeah. So yeah, Trent knows his college sports pretty well too, I guess. And what I did was I put a star beside pro and junior, because for sure that's the area that we're going to get off the ground. College, I'm finding, is such a, even if it's just the Midwest, if you include excuse me, NCAA Division I, Division III, and ACHA club teams, it's a lot of hockey.
Yeah, lots of hockey.
So. The stories will be mostly updates on all the leagues and Midwest teams in the leagues. In a lot of cases, there's leagues that, like for example, the NHL has 30 teams. 5 of them are based in the Midwest. So the primary coverage is just on those 5 teams. Obviously, they interact with the other 25 on any given night, but that's the main thing. I'm hoping during the season to do sort of a regular kind of show with sort of a preview show for a lot of the big games, and then a follow-up sort of results and news and that kind of stuff. For junior, I'd like to do something weekly where you can just kind of go over the big games that occurred on a weekend, and then at the same time look ahead to the next week at what's coming up. One of the things I'm hoping for, and I have no idea if we're going to be able to do it this year or not, because I'm not the sort of video expert for this site, and that's live streaming. I see a lot of people doing that for different type shows, and I think it would be kind of neat, especially if it was a big night, if there was 2 or 3 things going on at once, to sort of follow them live and give updates and that kind of stuff. So that's sort of my introduction. I should say too that I don't know if everybody knows what the Midwest was. The Midwest region of the United States for Midwest hockey. It's actually 12 states, and I'll go through them really quick. Illinois, Iowa, Ohio, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, both Dakotas, and excuse me, Indiana. That's 12 different states. So that's sort of a brief outline of what I want the site to do. I know it's a lot, don't you think, Trent?
Oh, hey, the more hockey, the better.
Yeah, it's a big area. So what we're going to do tonight, we're kind of going to go through the pro really quick and just do kind of an update on each of the 5 NHL teams, and then just do some quick on the other pro leagues, just so we can sort of get out there what teams we're going to be covering. So if we go alphabetical, it just so happens that the first team that comes up is the Chicago Blackhawks, and they just happened to win their 3rd Stanley Cup in 6 years, and that's a pretty impressive feat in the modern NHL, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, they've definitely turned into kind of a little bit of a dynasty here recently, and very impressive performances in the playoffs, and just seem to be so clutch when they need to be.
I did a story on them this afternoon, and one of the things that, excuse me, I said in the story, and I think it's kind of true, is that this season is similar to the first Stanley Cup they had, or the first of the 3. It was, I think, in the 09-10 season, where even as the run was going on, a lot of the talk was centered around how many of these guys are going to be able to return. It was evident that season and this season that salary cap issues were going to come into play at the end of the season. So I don't know if that put a little bit of pressure or incentive on the players to make sure that they got the job done because, the team was going to definitely be different in the season ahead.
Yeah, definitely. I think it probably put some spark under the fire, but I think when you got guys like Jonathan Taves and Patrick Kane, you're going to be good for years to come.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's necessarily this huge urgency, but every little bit of momentum helps.
Absolutely. I think it's the thing with the team is there's some really good players that have gone, and we're going to go through that in a minute. But the core players on that team, you mentioned the two of them, Taves and Kane, who they gave the huge contract to a season ago. Obviously, they're the sort of core guys. Obviously, Crawford, he's won 2 cups.
Keith.
Yeah, some of them. Yeah, Keith and Seabrook. Right. They're the guys that are pretty safe. One of the players that we all thought was going to be pretty safe is Brandon Saad. Every time somebody talked about what kind of issues they had coming up, the one thing they all said was for sure they're going to keep Brandon Saad. Losing him was certainly a surprise, I think, to a lot of fans, but I suppose a necessary step.
Yeah, I mean, I think what they were worried about is having to fork over a big contract, and didn't think they were going to be able to afford it, but it's definitely a major shock, and I don't know of many people that could be like, oh yeah, I saw that one coming.
Yeah, and the surprising thing about it, like they lost guys like Patrick Sharp, mid-30s, I think. He might be 34.
I think he's like 32.
Okay, so he's like a lot of people are saying he's kind of in the back end of his career, but if he's only 32, he's got some time left. And they lost Oduya, another veteran. They actually got a little bit younger, I think, by getting Trevor Daley, but. Brandon Saad, and you might find this surprising. I looked this up today. He's got 2 Stanley Cups to his credit. You know how old he is? 22. He'll turn 23 just at the start of the season. So that was probably the biggest reason for the surprise. Coming back the other way, they got Artem Anisimov, who he's a pretty good veteran. He only played about 60 games, I think, last year, but he'll be a key addition, I think. So he'll fit in there somewhere in that top 6, I think, and Marco Dano, I think, is one of the key guys coming back. Ryan Garbett, another, and he came in the trade with Dallas for Patrick Sharp, Ryan Garbett, and Trevor Daley. So there's certainly some good players coming back, and Coach Q always finds a way to plug them in and get the most out of them.
Mm-hmm.
One other player that I found looking through the different pickups and things like that is Victor Tikhonov, who might be a player many people haven't heard of, but he was a key player on the Phoenix Coyotes, like a really young player back when Gretzky was the coach of that team. A lot of the players that Gretzky coached, they were good young players. Maybe they were in the league a little bit too early. He ended up going back. He's a Latvian. He ended up playing in the KHL for the last couple of seasons, but he's committed to come back to Chicago, and he could be a bit of a surprise, I think. Vermette, interesting thing with Vermette. You think that guy, getting to go from Arizona to Chicago at the trade deadline is kind of like being released out of Siberia, I think. But ironically, when it came down to new money, signing for a new contract, he went right back to Arizona. Of course, he's going to have a Stanley Cup ring on his finger, but that I thought was a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to go from a market like Phoenix, which is almost non-existent, and might be in a few years, to, this crazy Chicago team.
Yeah.
This is now their 3rd Stanley Cup in 6 years, and, crazy fan base, and to go right back to Phoenix is a little baffling.
Yeah, I was surprised. He did maybe not have quite as offensive like he didn't have as big a role as maybe some people thought he would, or he just kind of had some bad luck, I guess. He never scored in those last games of the season. You know, the trade deadline's pretty late in the year. You only play 8 or 10 games, I think. But his first goal actually came in the playoffs. I can't remember if it was against Anaheim or Tampa, but it was an overtime game winner. So he timed it pretty good. So that's a sort of a quick look at the Blackhawks. All things considered, you know, they lost some key guys, some fan favorites. I think Sharp was a very popular guy. Saad, I think a lot of fans really loved him. But there's no doubt that team enters this season as a true contender for the Stanley Cup once again.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, they're the team to beat. And that brings us to the next team, alphabetically, the Columbus Blue Jackets. And this is one of the ones that I kind of have a personal thing for, because this is a team that's been in the league for 20 years now, and they have struggled most of the time. But I believe that getting John Davidson as the president and then Jarmo Kekalainen, or however you say it, as the GM, has helped that team turn a corner. And they've been much smarter in the draft, I think, and it shows. Last year was a bit of a setback for them, I think partly due to the injury bug. They were hit early by injuries. Now, I know every team gets hit by injuries, but they kind of went through a massive stretch, like to open the season, maybe the first 15 to 20 games, and they kind of went through a real rough stretch, including the key one, I think, at that point was goaltender Sergei Bobrovsky, who has been kind of the anchor for that team. And despite a run of, I think, about 15-1 or something like that down the stretch, they were literally the hottest team in the league going into the playoffs, but it was too late. I don't know if you carry some of that over into the new season, but it has to give the team at least a little bit of confidence.
Oh yeah, good confidence going forward. Big momentum booster. And like you said, Sergei Bobrovsky.
Yeah.
I in my opinion, I think he's one of the top goalies in the league.
Agree.
And
Yeah, I agree. I think
major injuries. You had Saad.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. You know, going into here's one of the things, and this is just as of this afternoon. I saw a story. Apparently, there's a video up there from the Columbus files somewhere. There's one of them where they're following the team. Here's what happened with the Columbus Blue Jackets at the draft, Trent. They had the 8th overall pick, and they really wanted to get a good, solid defenseman. I mean, everybody was talking about how the Jackets needed to get a good defenseman, and they did. They had the 8th pick overall, and they got Zach Werenski, a product of the U.S. National Development Team. He actually played his first year at Michigan with the Wolverines last year, and he had 25 points in 35 games, which is pretty darn good for a college defenseman. Right in front of them, 5th overall, was Noah Hannafin, who was sort of the premier defenseman, I think, of the draft. He went 5th to Carolina. And then Ivan Provorov, who I think was another top-notch defenseman, went to Philly. Just saw it today. Think about this. You're the GM. This would have been a really interesting thing to consider. Apparently, after one of the players that the Leafs wanted to get, when I can't remember which one it was. It was probably the one that went 3rd. I can't remember though. They ended up taking Mitch Marner. It was the other guy there from Erie, I think, that went 3rd. And the Leafs apparently called Columbus and said, "We will give you our 4th for your 8th." Which, that part sounds okay. But they also wanted their 34th and 38th, which is 2 second-round picks, and another one, I think, in the 4th round. So it was like 1 pick for 4, but it would have got them Noah Hannafin. So I'm sure that was something that, you know, and that was just today I read that. That had to be something that they at least considered, but I think the price was just too steep.
Yeah. And I really like Zach Warnewski, his teammate of Dylan Larkin.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah.
And I was actually hoping, that I saw some rumors that the Red Wings were possibly going to draft up, and he was one of the players I would have looked
They
like
were talking about? Okay. Yeah, he certainly had good numbers at the University of Michigan. I don't know if if he has a chance or wants to try to commit to going to Columbus this year. I suspect he's likely looking at going back to Michigan for another year. If he did want to take a shot at it, he'd probably have to give up on his college career and could end up playing in Lake Erie instead. It would be a bit of a gamble on his part, I guess. The other pick they had in the first round, they ended up getting from Tampa Bay. Actually, no, they got it, I think, from Toronto. Toronto had 29th pick, and they picked up another defenseman, Gabriel Carlson, who played for Linköping in the Swedish. He played for both the U20 team and the Swedish elite team, and he played for Sweden at World Juniors. So again, a player taking that 29th overall, you generally don't think he's going to be there this season, but he's got some pro experience, and I'm sure they'll be giving him a good look.
Yeah, you always like to see those first round picks, stockpile them a little bit. As soon as you get after the top 10, the likeliness that someone makes it their first year is drops dramatically. But Columbus is a young team, and they're building a base that is going to make them good for years to come.
Yeah. And then obviously the move we already talked about was Chicago. Brandon Saad coming in as a huge addition. He picked up 74 points for the Hawks last year. They got the rights to Brandon Saad. He obviously was a free agent at that time, and they got defenseman Michael Paliotta and center Alex Broadhurst from Chicago. And they sent the other way. They paid for these guys. Artem Anisimov was a pretty good veteran. He was definitely in their top two lines. Marco Dano, who played a handful of games. I think he went back and forth a little bit, but they expected big things out of him. They sent Jeremy Morin back to the Hawks. He's a former Hawk that had been traded to Columbus maybe last year, and he goes right back. And Corey Trop, another top young player. So Chicago really stacked up with young players that might be able to help them or might be able to help Rockford. We don't know yet. So they paid a pretty steep price, but they got the best player in the trade. So right out of the gate, that's something that's going to help them out, I think.
Yeah. That's one thing you look at in a trade. Who got the best player? As of right now, definitely, no question, Brandon Saad.
Right. Later in the summer, a little bit later, the Jackets signed Gregory Campbell from Boston, who was known for being a good two-way center. So they had a little bit of depth at center, and I think up front that they're going to be looking pretty good this year. They're going to have two pretty solid lines. And again, if they can stay out of the injury problems that they've had before, I think they should be a contender to, 2 years ago they went to the playoffs and gave the Pittsburgh Penguins a good run in the first round. They picked up their first franchise playoff win and almost their first franchise playoff victory, like series win. And I think they're a good bet to make the playoffs this year, and who knows, they could go deep.
Yeah, no doubt.
So that brings us to the Detroit Red Wings, and that's an interesting team there. I'm going to kind of let Trent take the lead on this team, but we do know that they they had a solid season, struggled maybe a little bit down the stretch, but got enough together to get into the postseason, and then gave the eventual conference champion Tampa Bay Lightning all they could handle in the first round, and easily could have won that series.
Yeah, like you said, starting from the trade deadline, uh, struggled down the stretch, went from being a contender to take over one of those one or two spots and get home ice advantage
Right.
to barely sneaking into the playoffs.
Yeah, right.
And so that was a little unfortunate. Um, but, he gets a couple of key additions in free agency with Mike Green, who's the defenseman that they've been talking about trading for the last 2-3 seasons. And so right-handed shot. A little bit of a defensive risk, which is funny from a defenseman, but great is going to be great on the power play.
Mm-hmm.
As of right now, it sounds like he's going to be paired with DeKaiser, who's a good defenseman.
Yeah.
Mike Babcock actually referred to him as the human eraser.
Yeah, he's a big boy.
Which I also think he's part of the reason Kyle Quincy had a good season last year. And then also Brad Richards,
Mm-hmm.
who's going to be real key, coming off that cup win. Getting older. I think he's about 33 now, 34. But with the biggest news of the whole offseason, Pavel Datsyuk, for sure, sounds like he's not going to be there for the beginning of the season. And it sounds like he might actually miss an extended period of time. So,
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because, again, just today I saw something. They had been talking about him being out until the start of the season, and now they're talking about November, I think.
Yeah.
So at least a month or so into the season. And he's a guy that's been somewhat fragile in the past, so hopefully they take the time they need, and it won't be a big deal if he can come back and play regular after that.
Mm-hmm. And, yeah, I think he's one of those players, veteran player, one of the smartest players, hands down, smartest players in the NHL. So once he comes back, he should be able to slide right into the lineup.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty seamless.
Yeah.
But now that Brad Richards' pickup is, huge. And then it also gives a guy like Dylan Larkin, who's one of the Red Wings' top prospects, along with Alexei Marchenko, defenseman. You got a couple guys like that. And then it gives us a lot of depth at center. Then in the draft, we got Evgeny Sveshnikov in the first round, who's a big winger, Russian. Excited to be on the team. One of his idols, Pavel Datsyuk.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So to get to play with a guy from your home country who is a legend is pretty exciting for a young guy. And I think also the Griffins, I think they're going to have a pretty good team. You got Mantha. I mean, they're deep with young talent, and so it's just a matter of getting those guys up. And you hate to see Pavel Datsyuk injured, but you prefer it to be at the start of the season rather than the end of the season.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think that I don't know when it happened, but Detroit has always been a team that was famous for replacing old guys with other old guys, and in the last 3 or 4 seasons, they've emerged as a young team with a really potent farm system. Not only the Griffins, but the Toledo Walleye team, was the best Midwest team in the ECHL. There is a ton of talent in the minors, and you talked about Green. That's going to do at the beginning of the season. Maybe hold back a guy like Marchenko. He might not get on the roster to start the season, but they have really not slowed down. They haven't been held back by injuries in the past couple of seasons. There's just another guy waiting to come up every time somebody goes down, it seems.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of forecasting a little bit. I don't think the Red Wings are finished making moves.
Oh.
With Pavel being out for a while now, and that being verified, you got 7 defensemen. that are all competing. Plus, it's been said that um, they want to get a young guy in the lineup like Oliet or Marchenko. So, are you going to make a trade there to try to free up a roster spot?
Yeah.
Jimmy Howard, what's going to go on with our goaltending situation?
Boy. Yeah.
And then with Pavel being out, are you going to get another? Are you going to trade and get some offense? You got extra defense. So what are you going to do there? And they have to drop some cap also after signing Nyquist.
Yeah, the other thing too that I saw is you mentioned the two defensemen that are in the minors, sort of their top guys in Roulette and Marchenko. There's actually a couple others down there too, and this I was reading today that I don't know how it works, but this is the final season that the four of these guys can be sent back without having to clear waivers. So it is a big season, and they're saying, especially with having Blashill now as the coach, they said over the course of the season they'll probably get a pretty decent look at all four of them, and I thought to make some pretty big decisions in the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing you want to do is let go of a guy who's going to be a stud down the road.
Yeah.
And so I think they'll definitely look to try to make a little bit of room.
Yeah.
Maybe free up a roster spot or two to bring in a couple young guys. I think they're going to want to give Larkin a shot. Take a look at him, who's been playing phenomenally at every level he steps up into. And Anthony Mantha, who I know he came off that injury last season, but a guy like that, 6'5" shooter, scored 50 goals the year he got drafted
On Windsor, yeah.
and then even more so the next year. So he has the ability. He just has to start clicking in the pro system.
Yeah, I think he had a bit of a rough run after he came back from his injury last year, but they're not going to be able to keep him down the minors too long.
Yeah.
So let's move on, and thanks, Trent, by the way.
Yep.
That was awesome. Let's move on to the Minnesota Wild, and this is the one team that maybe hasn't been quite as noisy in the offseason as the others. They have made some moves, but when I first think of the Wild, the first thing I think of is the great run they had through the second half of the season. I can't remember the exact start point, but pretty much right around the All-Star game on, I think they really put themselves in the hunt, and then went beyond that. Moved, I think they were third in the division, so they were comfortably in the playoffs by the time the season was over. And I don't think you can give the guy all the credit, but a big part of it was the introduction of Devin Doobie, who really kind of took over between the pipes for them, which is ironic because this is a team that's had so many goalies over the years. Backstrom and Kemper and Harding. They had Brzgalov for a while, and I think I'm forgetting at least one or two. But Dubnyk kind of came in and put the team on his back. Went on one stretch where he played about 35 games in a row, I think, or something like that. And definitely that was a big key. And he signed a 6-year deal at the end of the season, so they're going to count on him to be, I think, their key guy in goal.
And which is really cool about him is he had gotten passed around a little bit.
Yeah.
Playing a backup role.
Absolutely, yeah.
And teams kind of gave up on him quickly and passed him on, and all of a sudden everything just clicked in Minnesota.
Yeah, he really found a home there, didn't he?
Yeah.
I think he had a decent run for a while in Edmonton too, but for the most part, like you say, I think he's been looked at as a backup. He's no backup in Minnesota.
No.
He's their guy. They did, in the first round of the draft, they had 20th pick overall. So I think they did pretty well. They picked up Joel Eriksson Ek, who was a guy I thought was destined for the Red Wings. and they picked. I can't remember if they picked right before the Red Wings or right after. I think it was right after.
Yeah, right after. 19 was the Wings, 20th, Minnesota.
And I guess I thought he was destined for the Wings partly because of some of the mock drafts, but of course because of that Swedish thing. The Red Wings always seem to
the Swedish
like
connection.
The Swedes, yeah. Eriksson Ek played in Farjestad in the Swedish Elite League, and again, with a player drafted at that point of the season, I would think he might be a year or so away. But they have some good prospects in their system. Mm-hmm. They had a prospects camp a little, I think it was last week. And I don't know if you saw it, but there was one of the goals that kind of went viral. One of them young guys, they showed them all the ones that Connor McDavid scored. Anyway, they had their version. They had a shootout goal by Alex Tuch, who was their first round pick last year. He scored a sweet goal and then a nice little celebration afterwards too. And I think he's a player that you might see in a Wild jersey this fall. They also signed Mike Riley. He was a junior at the University of Minnesota. He had been originally drafted, I believe, by Columbus, but they didn't sign him in the 2 years they could, and he became a free agent, I believe. Went to the Wild, and he's, I'm sure, thrilled because he is from Chanhassen, Minnesota. So he's a Minnesota boy. He's kind of like Larkin. Larkin, he played all his hockey, and he played with the national development team and went to University of Michigan and Detroit. This guy played, he was a junior at Minnesota. So he was from Minnesota, went to the University of Minnesota, and now he's going to be playing he will be playing for the Minnesota Wild. He was a finalist for the Hobey Baker Award this past season, so I think they're looking for big things from Mike Riley. They also re-signed Granlund, who was one of their better players. That was a key signing. And I think that they're coming into a pretty key season. With Ryan Suter and Zach Parise, they are both going to be 30 by the time the season starts. And you got Vanek, Mikko Koivu, and Jason Pominville. We're all in that 30 to 32-year-old range. So definitely sort of in the prime years of their career, and maybe a little bit of urgency to make sure something happens. Tuch, by the way, was at Boston College. He scored 28 points in 37 games. I had that written here. I should have noticed it before. He'd played on the national development team before that in the USHL. So that's a guy to look for this season. But I think there's some really good veteran leadership on this team with guys like Suter and Parise. They definitely got the firepower up front. Key veteran players, and like I said, the last two seasons, both seasons, they had kind of first round upsets, I guess you could call them. 2 years ago, they beat the Blues in Colorado in the first round. Had a really great series with Colorado. Ended up beating them, and then this past season, beat the Blues in the first round. Fortunately, both times they ended up running into the Chicago Blackhawks in the second round. So that's obviously the key to getting out of that division.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, they've been pretty quiet, but they've made quiet, key moves to keep that high level. And in the playoffs, beating the Blues, which, in my opinion, I honestly didn't give them quite a chance.
Yeah.
Because I thought St. Louis was going to be a team that was primed to make a run. So they definitely played good, but you run into Chicago Blackhawks, it's going to hurt you.
Yeah, everybody's going to go through Chicago to get out of that division. And like I said, they have the veteran players to put the importance on it. They're seeing that maybe that window closing a little bit. That'll be their incentive. Maybe with the move Chicago's made, they fall back to the pack a little bit. But, Chicago's always a different team in April and May than they are, say, at Christmas time.
Yeah.
So that brings us to perhaps the most profound off season. That belonging to St. Louis. Now, I don't have a lot of notes on that, but they have had some pretty huge things happen here in the off season, and we talked a little bit already about the disappointment they had at the end of the regular season. They were the first place team in their division. No, I'm sorry, they were second. They were the second place team in their division. Played Minnesota. I can't remember now. I might be wrong on that. Anyway, they were the heavy favorite to beat the Wild, and that division saw the third and fourth place teams move on, with the Wild beating the Blues and the Blackhawks getting past Nashville. But that's 3 years in a row that St. Louis has gone into the postseason with some major regular season sort of resume, and then kind of fell short. They've been eliminated in the first round, I think, the last couple seasons, and I think that everybody knew they were going to do something drastic. They were going to do something dramatic. And then to make things worse, they had no first-round draft pick this year because of the Ryan Miller pickup from a couple years ago, and I believe that's going to hurt them next year too.
Yeah.
So that was a gamble they made a year ago, and they paid a heavy price for that. They did sign Yuri Laterra, I think it is, to a 3-year deal, and the key signing, I guess, is Vladimir Tarasenko, who they gave a $60 million deal to him. So it would appear that they're going to build that team around that young star. But the biggest offseason move was the trade with the Capitals that saw TJ Oshie leaving town. Key guy coming back, I guess, being Troy Brouwer, hard-nosed forward, but again, TJ Oshie's probably the best player in the draft. They also got Phoenix Copley and a third-round pick in 2016, but that was probably the biggest surprise of the offseason so far, do you think?
Yeah. Oh, TJ Oshie, one of my favorite players to watch in the NHL. Real exciting. A little bit of a smaller guy, but not afraid of that physical game.
Yeah.
And with the team they have, a little bit, they got that good physical aspect, that physical talent that you think's going to go far in the playoffs and hasn't panned out. But if I'm the Washington Capitals, I see that deal coming. I don't skip a beat. I'm taking that deal right now.
Yeah.
All day,
yeah.
Every day.
Yeah.
And there was a big fan upheaval about that one.
Yeah, he was a fan favorite for sure.
Yeah. And actually, I think I'm gonna get a little Don Cherry on you, Jim, but little girl from Minnesota.
Oh yeah.
Starts crying.
Yeah.
Video goes viral. It's cute to see. But this is the second time now in the past 2 years, or not 2 years even, but with going to the NFL very shortly. Girl cries about Jimmy Graham getting traded. Tickets, apparel. Do not do this. Don't let it catch you on.
Yeah, right. Good point. So that's definitely a team to watch. I think they're looking to change their identity. Troy Brouwer is a good, hard-nosed forward. I mean, if that's what they're looking for, maybe they're looking for a little more toughness and playoff experience. I know when they first had that season, they kind of came from out of nowhere and had a big season 3 years ago now, I guess. And they made it to the postseason. They were first overall. And I had kind of suspected that they'd have some maybe a little bit of trouble in the postseason because they didn't have a lot of playoff experience. But that's not really an excuse anymore because most of these guys have been there a few times now. So I'm not really sure what is missing in that equation. I don't know if you have any input on that, but it's definitely going to be interesting to see how they approach this year. I definitely a very important year for the Blues.
Yeah, like you, Jim, I'm a little baffled that
Yeah.
they haven't done anything in the playoffs. I really like the Blues team. I like their mentality. I think Tarasenko, I think he's a great player. He's going to be a good player for them down the road.
Yeah.
Good player you can build around. But you need to build around them. I definitely think they need to add some more scoring upside.
Okay.
I think you're building good from the back end. So it's really hard to say, but obviously they felt they needed to shake it up a bit and let the players know that there's urgency and that they want to win and they'll do whatever it takes to win.
So if ever there was a chance for somebody who, played for the Chicago Wolves to make their presence felt and maybe make a name for themselves in camp and earn a spot, this might be it because the team is looking for something. And I think, kind of like what you said about the Red Wings, the Blues might not be done yet. There might be some moves that they're looking to make. They are, they're pretty good in goal. And they, I think they have, obviously, they won that division, and that's a tough division. So they definitely have a lot of really great players there. They just need to win the games at the right time. So I suppose, they've made some drastic moves, which a lot of people expected, but time will tell how this is going to play out for them. And in a conference, it's going to get, tougher and tougher with teams like Edmonton and Dallas, both improving. You can't take a year off in this division, or you could find yourself below a lot of teams.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of does it for the NHL portion, and thank you very much, Trent, for that. I kind of wanted to go through the other pro teams. There is 3 other pro divisions or pro leagues that have teams from the Midwest. Most of them have a connection to the Midwest NHL teams as well. For example, in the American Hockey League, which has gone through a bit of a realignment with adding a lot of teams from the West Coast. It's worked out that the Iowa team, which is Minnesota's team, so it's the Iowa Wild, they play out of Des Moines. They've been moved into the Midwest Division now, so they no longer will be in the same divisions like Oklahoma City and the Texas teams. They will be in with the Chicago Wolves, which is St. Louis's farm team, the Grand Rapids Griffins, which has kind of been the class of that Midwest group for the last couple seasons. They're the Red Wings farm team. The Lake Erie Monsters is Columbus's team, and they missed the postseason the last couple of years, but with the moves Columbus has made, they're only going to get better. And then the Milwaukee Admirals are Nashville's team. And I think that is Rochester is not in the Midwest, but they are the Chicago Blackhawks team. So the other teams in that division are Manitoba, which you could almost include as a Midwest team. They're not technically in the Midwest because they're in Canada, but they're right across the border from Minnesota, so close enough. And then Charlotte, which is kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So that's the AHL. Most of those teams are going to be in the same division this year, which is nice. The ECHL, East Coast Hockey League, has also gone through a lot of changes, and that's because all the West Coast teams were formerly in the ECHL, so they've juggled and had a lot of teams move around and stuff, and as a result, the teams in the Midwest are playing in, I believe, 4 different divisions this year. In the actual Midwest division is the Cincinnati Cyclones. They are a farm team. They are property of Florida and Nashville, so they would have an affiliation with the Milwaukee team. The Evansville Icemen They are a farm team of Ottawa. Fort Wayne Comets, who had a pretty good playoff run this year, they are the farm team of Columbus, and the Indy Fuel is the farm team for Chicago. They play in Indianapolis. Then in the North Division, there's only two left in that division that used to have a lot of Midwest teams. The Toledo Walleye, that's Detroit's team, and they had a nice playoff run last year, going to the conference championship. You don't know the interesting thing about that team, Trent? They played 3 series in the playoffs. All 3 of them went 7 games. They started out as the favorite and went 7 games with the Wheeling Nailers, and then they had a great 7-game series with Fort Wayne Comets, and then they had a 7-game series with South Carolina for the conference championship. And if I'm not mistaken, Game 7 went to 3 overtimes before South Carolina won that. You can't go any further than that.
Yeah.
So that was pretty amazing for them. Unfortunately, it ended up without them moving on to the Kelly Cup. The Kalamazoo Wings are in that division as well. They have a dual sponsorship, Columbus and Vancouver. In the Central Division is the Missouri team, which is affiliated with the Islanders, and Wichita, which is an independent team. Quad City is another in the Midwest. They're the affiliate of Minnesota. And Rapid City is in the West Division. They're the only team that's in the West Division. They're right on the border there of South Dakota and I think Wyoming. So they are pretty far west as it is, and they'll be in that West Division with all them new West, or with a lot of the teams like Texas and stuff like that, I think. So that's it for that league. The other league is the SPHL, and that's not hard to keep track of. They only have one team in the Midwest, and that's the Peoria Rivermen, long-time affiliate of the St. Louis Blues. Now with the it's an independent team, obviously, playing in the SPHL. And that brings a close to, I guess, this opening session. It went kind of long, I think. But Trent, I do appreciate your help with this.
Yeah, no
and
problem.
Hopefully we can get together and do this on a fairly regular basis. Not sure if we'll be able to do it regular through the summer, if there'll just be, that much stuff. We'll keep our eyes peeled for any stories we can talk about. And then coming up in early September, the rookie tournaments, including obviously the big one in Traverse City that has most of these teams in it. We'll be following that, and any news we can find. So thank you very much, Trent.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to be here.
If you're a fan of junior or college hockey, I'm hoping to do some of these things in the near future for them as well, to get them online. And if you have any comments or anything, let us know. My email is jim@midwesthockey.info. So you can let me know if you have any comments or anything like that. I apologize if we missed anything. We did kind of just put this together as sort of a glorified test, and there was so much time that was coming into this, really going through the regular season till now, that we kind of had to gloss over a lot of stuff, but hopefully we can be have a little bit more detail on things from here on in. So thank you very much. And
Hey, Jim.
Yeah.
You mind if I get the sign off?
Okay, sure.
Stay classy, Midwest.
Thank you.